Welcome to Parenthood Bites, the podcast where we explore life as a parent in tech. I'm your host, Chow, and I have over 15 years of experience in tech, and I'm also currently working as a career coach. I'm the proud mother of 3 incredible boys. In each episode, we have an inspiring guest who will share their remarkable story. You'll find their wisdom and insights both relatable and enriching, because after all, we're all in this parenting journey together. So grab your favorite drink, get cozy, and let's dive into today's episode. Hi everyone, welcome to episode 49 of Parenthood Bites. We're here today with Michael, who was working security at Meta for 10 years and has a security role at another high-tech company. Hi Michael, how are you?
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on the podcast. I've interviewed a lot of people who are like software engineers and stuff at tech companies, but although you've been in the tech space for several years, you're in sort of a different role, right? Can you tell me a little bit about your security role there?
Sure. Before I begin, I kind of want to make sure, like, for individuals who are just getting into the tech industry or starting a family in the tech industry, know that in the tech industry, it takes a village to run a tech industry. And so there's different facets of departments. And most of us, when you think about tech, we think about coding, we think about graphics, we think about robotics, but we forget that there's other portions such as maintaining the buildings with facilities, keeping everything sanitary. And more importantly, with companies that are up and coming, security. And so that's what department that I kind of fall into and have been able to grow with for the past 10 years and continue to do so in my current role in another tech company. I've been very fortunate in the last 10 years to kind of be able to reset after I left the world of privatized corrections where I worked for the federal and state. I was lucky enough to have this opportunity and I worked as a security guard, elevating up to an account manager where at Meta, I protected a black site, a non-existent site for a project that needed a lot more privacy. And so that gave me a lot of experience on how to communicate with individuals on the privacy needs of the building, not to mention because we were in a public building, how to communicate with the general public as to what we were, because usually people get very suspicious when people walk into a private building all spiffy. Some people thought our building was a club, a fancy restaurant, and when we tell them it's a private company, they literally went straight to, oh, you guys are probably the CIA. I'm like, no, we're a tech company. But the finesse in being able to explain that. So when I elevated into the main campus in Menlo Park, I actually graduated all the way back to training all of the security officers. I was the head training manager for all of the security teams at Facebook. So at the time, it was about 1,000 security officers growing. I think by the time I transitioned from that role to a new promotion, we were getting closer to about 2,500. So it takes that many people, and if not more, to be able to protect such a large company at the time. Obviously, things are very different now in regards to the evolution of technology, and a lot of it is being able to visually see any potential threats that the company might have and or respond to any incidents within a timely manner.
How many people were on campus at that time for that many number of security guards?
Meta at the time, I'll probably tell you, we had 4 different campuses within the Menlo Park area. Each campus can hold up to anywhere between 3,000 to 4,000 people. And that required, unfortunately, people to find parking. We had valet people parking for people. We had buses running all day long. And this was all pre-work from home too as well. So you can only imagine when work from home started, how many more individuals we probably hired into it to try to fill in more gaps before the shift in the economy happened.
Right. That was my next question around like the pandemic. How did your job shift during everybody's work from home?
So the cool thing about Meta, at least for our experience, they were very generous about ensuring us and letting us know that during the pandemic we had work. And so when the pandemic happened, I actually went internal with the company and my role basically shifted to emergency services. And so the goal basically was we shifted from on-campus protection to what we need to change in regards to protection when the people return back to campus, because not only was it the masking, the sanitary practices, but figuring out who and what type of individuals in any type of radicalized organizations would try to make a threat or try to make any type of breaking an entrance into the company. Because again, the one thing a lot of people don't realize is as famous and as world renowned as Meta or Facebook was, the only way to get into Facebook or Meta was by either being a guest of an employee who was approved to have guests or simply being an employee itself. So in a lot of ways, it was almost like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. So there were a lot of rumors that were spreading that, we were doing. There was a lot of folklore. And believe it or not, in its peak, there would be at least over 1,000 attempted visitations at Facebook by about 10 o'clock in the morning.
Just random people?
Yeah, for a lot of people who visit Silicon Valley, at the time,
They want to do that thumbs up.
they want to do the thumbs up.
I've
They
seen
wanted to
it.
visit Google. They want to visit Apple. And the irony about it is that, it's the only thing we really can offer them is the thumbs up. And the thumbs up is a very globally known entity in the tech world. And so it's almost like a pilgrimage for a lot of people. And a lot of it is we forget that Facebook is very different from a lot of apps out there because it's a very personal app. It affected so many millions of people in different ways. For example, it gave certain people who had families in other countries the ability to communicate in real time. As someone myself who was a first generation immigrant along with my parents, I can now communicate with my cousins and my nieces and nephews in real time as opposed to 10 years before, we would have to buy a phone card in hopes that we would be able to connect through the landline. But also the negativity portion of it too is you have individuals who try to use social media for nefarious purposes and they were caught because social media and people banded together to expose the individual. So now this individual is upset with the social media company and maybe plotting to do something to get their vengeance or to get their, whatever they want to do with the company. And so being prepared for all those situations is very, very important.
Yeah, I remember at Twitter when like something went out and they would, send a message to all of us and be like, "Hey, come in from the other door. Hide any clothing, anything that has the brand on it." Just very did whatever they could to make sure that we were protected and, as long as we were outside of the building.
And that was the thing too, right? I mean, when I started with the company, I wore the brand all over the place. I mean, we had a company store and Facebook was just plotted right in the middle of my shirt. And everywhere I would go, people would ask, and it was like you were almost like a semi-local celebrity when you had it. And then towards the end, when people realized that it also unfortunately painted a target on your back, we had to
Right.
double back and rebrand a lot of our things to be a little more subtle and also teaching our team members to protect their assets from laptops, cell phones, even their badges. Because some people would leave and never take off their badges because some of them use it as a badge of honor. Like they've been working their whole life to work for a big tech company and now they're working for Facebook. Or individuals who would travel and just not secure their stuff and people would just snatch their stuff. And next thing you know, you have an unlocked cell phone that has internal access to a company. So we have to make sure we protect that.
For sure. So, I wanted to start with how many kids do you have and what are their ages?
Sure. So currently, more likely that's about it though. I have two kids. Currently, they are 12 and 10. The youngest is finishing up her fifth grade year, and the eldest is currently in seventh grade.
So, one is in elementary, one is in middle school.
Correct. Yeah, because I think when we were in school, elementary ended at fourth. And then, so currently, right now, elementary now ends at fifth, and then they transition into middle school from sixth to eighth grade.
Right. Our middle school was fifth to eighth grade. That's
Correct.
right. I forgot about that. It was too long ago.
It was a very interesting shift when my child entered middle school. I'm like, wait, they don't go till when? I was like, all right, I'll trust the system.
And they also start school a lot earlier, right? From
They
summer.
do. They do. And it's interesting you say that too, because in the tech world, being a parent, success planning becomes very apparent because in the months of August, when most of us in our time are still going on vacation, we're planning early. And so I think the shifting from purchasing back to school clothes and waiting for the right prices to be available, to be able to stock up on supplies, it changes a lot of things in terms of demographics of how you plan ahead, not just for work, but also your kids and your partner's success.
Yeah, and I feel like they move it every year. And so you have to adjust. It gets a little earlier every year. Not by much, but just a few days each time.
I feel like they roll the dice and they like have bets and like which way do you want to go this year.
Or maybe a dartboard. Who knows?
That dartboard seems way more realistic. Yes.
So you mentioned that you were doing corrections and then you went to Meta to do security. Like what brought you to the tech company?
So because I was working privatized corrections, it was a contracted company. So if a lot of people are familiar. There are two different roles in corrections. There's the federal and state and county types of corrections, and then there's the contracted ones. So we are contracted by the federal and state government. Unfortunately, our wages are not comparable, and neither were the benefits. And so when we found out we were expecting my first child, it required a lot of transition for my wife and myself because currently at the time we were living in San Francisco. And for a lot of individuals, to be able to raise a family in San Francisco is a very unique opportunity. At the time, based on the individuals I worked with and based on the families that I knew, we understood very quickly that we would not have the resources necessary to be able to successfully raise a family where we currently were. And so we ended up moving back to Union City, which was the town I grew up in. My wife grew up in Vacaville, but our work and our opportunities that we had were all centered here in the Bay Area. And so we made the decision to move back to a smaller town like Union City. At the time, I actually left corrections to work back because I was called back into work semi-management in loss prevention retail. So I went back to doing that for a little bit, trying to go back to the quieter life for a little bit. And I had a very close colleague actually drag me into working into Facebook. So believe it or not, I didn't even want to work for Facebook. I was happy. I was done working the crazy life of corrections, all the great experiences I've had, but also unique and like only you would being exposed to it would actually see what it means in regards to just the graphicness, the ability to pivot and how your mentality works, and just being able to communicate with individuals who are in that culture. And it is a culture on its own, just like tech world is a different culture. But when I got into tech security, it was a very, very easy fit for me. And the reason why I say that is tech world security requires a lot more finesse on how you communicate with individuals, as opposed to being forceful or aggressive in regards to like corrections, or even as a doorman, as a bouncer. I also worked as a bouncer part-time on top before I had my kids. So it was great because generally I'm a very nice person. I like to tell people that. And so being able to just use my voice and the different types of dictions and tones to be able to de-escalate individuals was a lot more enticing to me than having to physically restrain somebody. But when that happened, it was just a very nice fit, and I was able to elevate myself very quickly in the tech field, and it was a great fit up until, again, the economy changed. But the one thing that also I want to make sure people understand is if you're someone who is working either in the security divisions, just know that when times are tough, your job is going to be very important. But when the company is no longer in scrutiny or in the eyes of a lot of pressure, usually the company will reevaluate the necessity of security first. That's what ended up happening to us. Like post-pandemic, Meta wasn't really pushing out anything big or controversial they used to require the same amount of security or media attention. And so they decided to restructure it a lot sooner than a lot of the other departments. And that's what led to the first transition of a lot of individuals' jobs.
I hadn't thought about it like that. So you said you transitioned off of that job to a different job at that time. What made you decide, like, hey, let me stick to doing security for tech executives at tech companies? What made you not want to go like in other industries or, explore other options?
Yeah, funny you should say that. And it goes along the lines of our theme for your podcast, my kids. It was literally a sole decision for making that decision was about my kids. As the trainer for Meta, I was almost on call 24 hours a day because remember, the physical security team works day, swing, and grave. And so a lot of times the new hires that were training grave would have questions that the team on staff wouldn't be able to answer. And I would get random calls at like 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. And I was very lucky because I was able to train myself to wake up, answer the question, and then fall right back to sleep. Like it was
That's amazing.
even my wife was amazed, like, how do you do that? I was like, I answer their question, I go back to sleep, I'm fine. But that to me was okay because I'm used to being on demand with a lot of my other jobs. But where it started to really affect me was my family and I would be in the middle of a movie. Like we would be watching, and my daughter was maybe 3 or 4 at the time, and my youngest was just 1.5. We were watching a movie, now we get a phone call, and I would have to step outside from the movie theater and actually take a call that would last anywhere between 10 to possibly half an hour. And then I come back like, what happened to the movie? I guess I'm watching it on DVD now or Blu-ray at this point. And so that was the very first wake up call. And it wasn't until my oldest actually had the ability to say, hey, Dad, where are you going? That was a very big eye opener for me because now she's conscious that I'm leaving her presence as opposed to being available and being present with my family on top of not allowing my work to overrule and take over my lifestyle. And so after that happened, I made a conscious decision to have the ability to transition to a role that had a little bit more balance in the security division. And so that's where I eventually ended up with emergency services because I was able to jump on projects that were just as if not almost more important because at emergency services, I was in charge of helping to plan out emergency scenario trainings such as active shooter, bomb threats, chemical warfare, things of that nature, which are all things that basically are honestly are true things that can happen in any major tech company that's being possibly infiltrated or attacked. And so being able to do that allotted me a lot more freedom and time to balance my availability with my kids and also more importantly, be present if the kids started having activities such as, after school activities, being able to take them there if they had ballet at the time or gymnastics, I can be present over there. And so it gave me a lot more control of what I wanted. And I think that's where a lot of people sometimes have a hard time with their careers is when is too much? And when is it going to cross a line where it can compromise the relationship of what your priorities are? So, I mean, again, there's families out there who understand and they're okay with it. But I made that conscious decision when I first found out that I was expecting my child, that I would be present in my kids' upbringing. And that was the thing that I had to learn to navigate. And again, if people ask me the question, the answer is yes. I did give up a lot of promotional opportunities that would compensate me financially significantly more. I gave up a lot of those. But at the same time, it didn't coincide with what my passion was. And my passion was being able to provide the best form of security for the division I'm in, while also not compromising the security and upbringing of my kids and my relationship with my wife also. Because that's also a paramount thing because it's teamwork.
Of course. So it sounds like you still stayed within the tech industry, but a different focus on what you're doing so that you have more of that work life balance.
Correct.
Are you still on call at all?
So my current situation with the tech industry and security is the schedule is a lot more regulated. However, the days of my days off do change, but at least now I'm able to work on certain things. For instance, I was able to make the conscious decision. So after I was laid off, I could have possibly gone and picked up a different job somewhere else immediately. I'm very thankful that I have the resources and network connections to have got me employed immediately, but would it be a career choice or opportunity that I would be happy with that would be in alignment with my passion and my goals for what I want for my kids and my family? The answer at the time was no. And so I waited until this new position came along, which required some traveling, but more importantly, the regular hours that I would actually have to report to allowed me to work in a certain time frame where it wouldn't distract me from being able to be there for my kids. So in other words, not to give too much information, because unfortunately my role requires a little bit of privacy, but in my current role, my wife is able to drop the kids off. I'm still able to pick them up from school, feed them, and then take them to their afternoon activities before needing to take care of what I need to do for my work. So I'm present. I'm able to, as long as I plan ahead, be present at any weekend games that they have. They are competitive now. One plays a competitive sport. The other one actually jumped into performance arts competitions. And so our weekends are very, very full and busy, but I'm thankful they are because we could just be at home lounging.
Right. You can be there for all the weekends and the afternoon stuff. And that's an awesome feeling.
Exactly. Just to kind of backtrack to where this changed, because when the pandemic happened, I had no choice but to play Mr. Mom. And I use that term very lightly because my wife, who was also an amazing partner and stability we had, still had to report to work because she worked in the hospital scene as a first responder. I myself had to step up, which for a lot of individuals, and again, it's not about the wife or the husband, but for the individual who was not as hands-on involved with the kids, it was a very big change because, now my kids and I have a much stronger relationship because of it. Because normally, if working for a fast-paced company like that, my life was originally a high and by with my kids, and then I would show up here and there. But because of the pandemic, they had no choice. They saw me 23 out of the 24 hours a day for the most part, right? And so at the end of the day, they were sick of dad. They were waiting to see mom, which is a very different thing.
But you really build on that relationship, right? Like that's a really strong relationship coming out of that.
It really is. And I think a lot of it too is in high school and in middle school, I was part of like a peer counseling training team that they experimented with. It's something I carried with me throughout all of my careers too, as well, including my kids. And so I do a lot of not necessarily check-ins, but daily touch points with my kids, because one thing I try to focus with them is dad's busy, but dad's here to ask you questions. And it's okay for you to share. And now my kids, honestly, at times overshare to the point where my wife actually gets jealous. She's like, how do you know this? I was like, they told me. She's like, well, I don't know. But what the one strategy I like to share with a lot of individuals who actually ask me is I don't allow my kids to share their day unless it's a 2-to-1 ratio. In other words, I subliminally coax this out of them, but my kids are not allowed to share with me incidents or stories throughout their day unless it's 2-to-1. When I say 2-to-1, what I mean is they have to share 2 good things with me that happen throughout the day before they can share 1 bad thing. Sometimes if I think I can tell that they're having a really bad day, I insist that they share 3 good things before they can share 1 bad thing that happened to them. And the result of what I'm trying to come out of is I know you really want to share this bad thing that happened to you, but look at these 2 or 3 other good things that happened to you throughout the day. So your day was not all completely bad. And it's almost like I tell people, it's like, it's almost like an optimist point of view. Bad things are going to happen, but you can't forget the good things that happen along the way, because you could be having a really good day for like 12 hours, but that last hour of your day where you run into somebody who's had a bad day, you allow them to completely ruin the rest of your evening. You're like, dang, I let that person really do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you're just focused on that.
Exactly.
I love your approach to that. How did you get to that? Like, did you read it somewhere? Did you try a few things and then you felt like that worked?
If you really want to know, the irony about it is when my wife was pregnant, I was excited. And then when we found out we were having a daughter, I was super paranoid, and a lot of it's just being able to adjust myself to raise a daughter versus a son. We're two totally different mentalities. And I did know that the one thing I consciously wanted to make sure of was I wanted there to always be an open communication with my kids. And I myself, who likes to find the lessons in a lot of different things that I experience, because I was always raised that whether it's good, whether it's a disappointment or a bad thing or an accomplishment, there's always a life lesson involved in it. And so I wanted to introduce that mentality to my kids because I know that eventually they're going to hit a wall. And I want them to be able to dig themselves out of that wall or pull themselves away from it to be able to continue to navigate or pivot and go around it somehow. And again, a really prominent mentor of mine really stuck this in my head because it's a hard thing to comprehend and accept because we're parents. And if you are there with your kids and you honestly are really nurturing, it's hard to come to accept the notion that all we can really do as parents is prepare our kids for the real world. We want to protect our kids, but eventually your kids have to crash and burn on their own, and you have to give them the ability to wipe off the scratches and the dust and be able to pick themselves back up because you want to do it for them because you're a parent. But at the same time, you're like, if I do this for them, I'm going to be enabling and they're going to be dependent on me forever.
We can't do it for them. We just have to give them the tools so they
Exactly.
know how to handle it.
Exactly. And as a parent and someone who's watched a lot of different things unfold, because again, I was in corrections, I've been in multiple different circles of friends, and hearing how, certain individuals assume certain genders versus other genders in terms of, and honestly, it just comes down to at the time when my child was born, there was a lot of different positive movements for women to be heard and voiced. And the one thing that I wanted to make sure my children were able to do was feel the comfort and ability or strength to be able to voice their concerns or opinions without being jotted down for it or being shot down. And a lot of it too, though, is I teach my kids. The one thing I teach my kids a lot of times is you can be a princess, but don't forget princesses have responsibilities too as well. And that's the one thing I taught them very quickly. Like, you want to be a princess, remember princesses have responsibilities as well. And so making them understand that knows that, hey, listen, at some point in your lifetime, you are not going to fit the mold. You're not going to be part of the circle of friends. You're the one that's going to stand out. And you know what? That's not a bad thing. Because if that's the case, you were meant to stand out, but there's a responsibility on how you make yourself perceived by other people. And so it's how you carry yourself. Because again, during our time, I'm going to say mid 2015s, the word diva was a very prominent word. And I don't like to use the word diva, especially after having daughters. By the way, side comment, jokes are funny for a lot of things until you realize you're having a kid with your friends. And then when you have a daughter, a lot of jokes stop becoming funny. You're like, hey, listen, yeah.
Right. And also I realized if I walk into somewhere and I hear music and there's bad words, it never bothered me before. And it was even like, oh, that's funny, whatever. But now, as soon as I'm in a public place and I hear bad words on the radio, I'm like, whoa. If I'm in a restaurant, I'm going to go tell them, hey, there's kids in here. You need to change the music. I've become that person. Whereas before, not only did it not bother me, I might even sing along.
And you know what? It is important because right now the understanding is by the time your kids get to middle school, the unfortunate situation is they're going to have friends whose friends or family members are not going to be as restrained in terms of their censorship. But at the same time, it's them understanding that to hear these lyrics or certain words and verses or slang words and understand what's appropriate and what's inappropriate, because everybody wants to throw it out there. But I mean, when we were growing up, awesome was cool, fresh. When we were young adults, that's hot. Now we have Riz, we have yachts.
Yeah.
And to the kids, it's normal because they feel like they're desensitized to it. But I think a lot of times we forget that the word fresh could also mean disrespectful back in the olden days, but people using it as a slang term today. And so them understanding that it's not appropriate and it's sending a certain message of acceptability over an individual who can perceive somebody in a non-positive way is is not appropriate, which, by the way, is also a lot of what security does in a lot of the tech worlds, because in the tech world, it's our job to protect the employees, but it's also our job to protect the employees from themselves. The reason why I say that is, like I mentioned before, the individuals out there who are just going through flying high, and a lot of times these individuals are not used to hearing the word no. And so being able to navigate their awareness without offending them becomes very important, because if they feel offended, they report that very quickly and you have to explain yourself as to what you're trying to do. And so being able to reword certain things as a security officer and on a security team or security management has helped me really fine tune my parenting skills with my kids, because instead of saying, "What the F were you thinking?" It's like, okay, what were you actually thinking when you thought that word came out? Do you know what it means? So being able to pivot from that explosion to calm and being able to ask the question, what were you thinking, or what led you to make this decision to act like this or to do this situation? So in other words, I guess the way I think about it is it helps me keep the lines of communications open with my children and also my wife too as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And did you have to do any training or anything to have to be able to speak in a certain way to these individuals?
You know what? The answer to that question is we do have training camps that we have. I used to run a training camp for my security officers. For me to give them the green light, to give them the thumbs up to start working, they would have to work with me for an entire week for a minimum of 8 hours a day. So that's 7 days worth of training. And then they would run through scenarios that I feel like is very common that they would run into. For instance, a prime example of how things can go very sideways very quickly. I had a security officer who greeted one of the employees one day. As that individual greeted the employee, what he said to the employee was, "Good morning. Hey, you look really tired today. Is everything okay?" The response from the employee was, "What are you trying to say? I'm just not wearing makeup today. Are you saying that I have to wear makeup every day to look presentable to you or not sad?" And so that opened up Pandora's box of being a little bit more sensitive in how we voice certain things. And again, the security officer did not mean anything offensive to it. They were just trying to see if they can have a small conversation, because that individual and the security officer had conversations on a regular daily basis. But on this particular day, it just pinched a nerve that wasn't meant to be pinched on accident. So we run through scenarios on how to better word things. Even if it's just like, "Good morning, how was your day today?" As opposed to going into detail. Because a lot of times our security officers are very eager. They're very happy. They like where they work. But also they forget that their job is to observe and report. And part of the word observing is actually answering open-ended questions that the individual can answer for you, as opposed to you assuming what they are. And that helps keep that conversation open. It's like, "Hey, how was your day today?" Then they'd be like, "Oh yeah, I had a long night last night. I had a fight with my husband or my partner, and but I'm here." It's like, well, then they can come to the response of, "Well, I'm hoping your day turns out better. You're here at work now. Hopefully something here will help turn your day around." As opposed to, that would have been her answer, but because he just said, "Wow, you look tired today," that set off like the last chip from the incident that happened last night, and they just scapegoated the security officer. And again, like I mentioned, our tech employees are so busy because many who assume certain roles are goal driven. They're not here to be paid by the hour. They're paid to finish a project by a certain date. And some days for them will be like 2 hours worth of work, and some days will be 16 hours worth of work. Some individuals would be here all night long and go home just to change their clothes and come right back. But our security officers have a set shift. And so some of them have to be educated in that verse, and that empathy, I think is the word, to be able to accept it. And part of that too is how I'm able to teach my children empathy in regards to, hey, that individual, hey, so and so at school was doing this. Well, have you thought maybe like so and so may be having a hard time at home?
Right, providing that additional context
Exactly.
for them that they potentially could not have thought about, which a lot of times kids don't. You don't think about that stuff. Adults either.
Oh yeah, and with my eldest, I'm entering my preteen years, which is the me years. So trying to level the playing field by saying, "Hey, you know what? Maybe I should give this person the benefit of the doubt," while understanding what her limits are in tolerance. Because remember, the one thing that we want to make sure I teach my kids is, I want you to be empathetic. I want you to be an open listener, but I don't want you to be a doormat. There should be a certain limit to how much you're willing to endure or put up with, until you really have to separate yourself from the individual and or stand up and voice your opinion. And a lot of it is, from the very beginning, I've always taught my kids, nobody can force you to do anything. You allow them to force you. That is a conscious decision you make. But also I tell them, but sometimes the decisions you make will not be the popular decisions from your friends of circles. You have to understand, you need to do what's best for you to protect yourself, what keeps you happy. If your friends don't understand it at the moment, you're going to have to learn to be okay with that, because eventually they'll come around if you're actually doing it for you and for the right right reasons.
Absolutely. And also sometimes they see their friends doing a certain thing. And I'm explaining to them, you see this person saying 10 bad words in like a few seconds, but like it's good you understand what that is, but you also understand, hey, that's not the right thing for me to do. You know, my kids will come and tell me, they'll be like, oh, some kids in class were just saying all these bad words, but I actually don't like that. They see it, you know, and as you're telling them about it, they're reasoning it on their own too. I'm starting to see that as well. Even when we're not next to them, they'll think about the things you said.
And that's the goal.
Yeah.
That's the goal, because I go back to saying to everybody, our job is to prepare them. Our hope is that they're able to regurgitate what we've mentioned to them when we're not present. And that's where a lot of it is, being able to nurture their self-confidence in themselves with their values. And it's really important, because things, especially living in the Bay Area, move so fast. Trends move so fast. Things that we are concerned about, the media tries to tell us to be concerned about, moves and shifts so fast. You know, you think this is like the worst thing in the world is happening. Next month, it's a new worst thing that's happening in the world, right? Or this is the coolest thing ever. Next month is the next coolest thing ever. It just happens so quickly that as a parent, if you're not present, you're probably like 3 evolutions behind already by the end of the month.
That's how I feel about these kid slangs, these new generation slangs. I'm like, wait, I'm still learning the previous ones, and now there's new ones. Like, what?
I am on the same boat as you, and it's an unfortunate realization that I am coming of age,
Yeah.
aka I'm getting old, because I can't keep up anymore.
Yeah.
But the good news is thankfully there's search engines that'll kind of give me some
Right.
background of what I hear. That way I can figure out if, hey, is this derogatory or is it just meaning something else? And then like, okay, let's have this crucial conversation with my kids and my wife. Like, listen, you guys hear this? This is what they're really trying to say, right? Okay, well, you guys know that we told you this is not okay. Like, yeah, I know. Okay, I just want to make sure you're good.
Yeah, make sure they know if they're repeating something, they know what they're repeating, right? Like, don't
Yes.
repeat this thing and then you're actually insulting half the people in the room you don't even know.
Exactly. And that's what becomes tricky, right? Because slang words transcend multiple generations of individuals. And so if you're like myself, where my kids used to, have 4 or 5 generations of family members, and you hear a slang word, 2 of the 3 can be like, oh, it's normal. The 3 can be like, yo, that is like the worst offending word ever, because they're translating it to what they originally grew up. I mean, it's funny because I look back, and when we educate ourselves, I laugh, because when we use the A double S word, it's supposed to just mean donkey. But now it's a whole different, in our time. And I'm like, okay. So it's being able to do that, and it's being able to like catch my kids up on the awareness as much as possible, because if I don't, the social media will, and that'll be a whole lot of crucial conversations after to correct what they assumed was the right thing to do.
Yes, absolutely. There's so much stuff out there, and it's hard for them. It's hard for a lot of adults, let alone kids, to depict like what's right, what's wrong, what's true, what's fake.
And I mean, I think the other thing that I'm seeing that we're slowly becoming more aware of, and the generation of families and kids have to be more aware of, is social media. What you see in there requires a lot of background checks in regards to news or stories. In other words, when you see something that seems important, just because 3 media sites were posted it doesn't mean it's factual. You would have to probably do a little bit more research before you buy into the information that's given to you, because sometimes there are things out there that are very good at propagandizing, I think the word I want to use, on what they want in terms of getting their message across. But there's perspectives that are left out. And so is it proper journaling as a journalist who posts those things? But it's not, because it's social media. It's just someone who knows how to reword certain things a certain way.
Absolutely. It's tricky. So, going back to a little bit about, when you started working, having kids and stuff, I was just curious, what was the parental leave like for both of your kids?
When the kids were born, my wife had a really good parental leave program, because she works for Kaiser. I can mention. So they have a really great program for parents that needed to take leave, especially the moms, the recovery time and everything like that. At Meta had a very amazing program, because not only did they financially support you, in other words, they cut you like I guess they call it a pregnancy bonus. So they cut you a check to help kind of ease you into the transition of a new child in the family. And the company, when I was there during the time, was very, very adamant about you taking the extended leave off for paid leave. They wanted you to take the time off. And
So,
it,
how
it's
long
it's
was that?
it totaled to sometimes almost like 8 months almost for some.
Did you take that for your second kid?
I did not. I jumped in with the company after my child was born. So I tried everything I can. Can I still try? Like, no, unfortunately you can't. I was like, okay. But, and that was the other question too that, we had within my wife and myself, it's like, did we want to expand our family with a third child prior? And again, it goes back to being a tech employee and understanding, can you have the resources to raise a third child if that's something that you want? Or if you're a single child family, do you have the resources to raise a second child? It becomes a little more trickier because there's a lot of things to balance out. And again, some people don't have the opportunity to make that decision. The higher powers that be, I'll leave it at that, gift you an offspring at times. And the good news about that is that working for a big tech company, there are multiple more resources you have at your disposal to find support. I mean, our company even had lactation support. So it was great. Meta had their own chiropractic team on staff, their own optical, dental, as well as primary care. So I'm not a big person to see a doctor unless I really needed to, but when I did, I would go and I would be able to do it on the clock.
That's pretty cool.
But again, it really comes down to just they were very good about that stuff, but also it's with the understanding that you know what your goals are and what you have to achieve prior to the deadline. And that's what they're trying to do. So there is a lot of responsibility on the employee to be able to balance those things. Because with me, for instance, in emergency services, I had multiple events I had to have ready. And these events basically had some upwards between like sometimes 10,000 individuals attending to even a higher amount sometimes. And I had to get that ready within like 6 months on top of everything else I had to do. And so being able to balance the time appropriately to plan out each day to dedicate to the projects while balancing all the other projects I had in security, and then still have time to make sure I blocked off enough time to spend with family to make sure that, I'm present too as well. So it's definitely a constant balancing act.
For your balancing act, what do you do for work-life balance?
You really have to be structured on how you set your blocks of time. And a lot of it also comes into play with you being able to have an amazing communication with your direct supervisor. So, in other words, your supervisor knows that these are your times that you are untouchable. And a lot of people are afraid to ask for those because they're afraid that they're going to be replaced if they're not available. But if you understand the scope of your role in the tech world consistently supports you trying to make time for yourself and time for your family. But you have to be very responsible for it. In other words, the time you're working, you definitely have to be working. The times you are with your family, you have to be consciously able to flick that switch, turn it off, and be present with your family because you're not going to get that back. And so I learned that very quickly when I had this conversation. I was still working corrections and I was actually on my way to transition out of corrections. But transitioning out of corrections, I was actually working towards the social working aspect of corrections. So in other words, I was meeting with the inmates on a regular basis. I was working on inmates that were ready to parole or probate out and teaching them the necessary life skills to be able to be competitive with job interviews and being able to explain to their potential employers that they are a convicted felon and these are the safeguards that you will be given if you're willing to hire me. In other words, they protect them. If for some reason the ex-felon causes you to lose certain amounts of money, the government will reimburse you for those kind of things to just to be able to give another who's just releasing from prison a shot at a job. My inmates, however, don't always have the best social skills. And so I will sit there with them for a half hour and they will give me this entire story of why they didn't make it to their mock interview or program that they were supposed to attend. Half hour, mind you. I was able to summarize it in like 2 minutes. So you're telling me that you didn't make it to your projected project here at the facility because you had an argument with your bunkie or your cellmate. You two have been screaming at each other all night. You were so upset that you couldn't fall asleep, so you overslept and forgot to go to your party. 30 minutes of this. 30 minutes, and I summed it up in that. Fast forward to the end of my shift, my wife comes home from work. She unfortunately had a very negative day at work. As soon as she drops her stuff, changes, she proceeds to tell me her entire day and just goes on and on. And unfortunately for this, now imagine for me at work, that's one person having to do 6 of those in one day. 30 minutes of like this and filtering it down. I told her, I said, listen, I just had a really rough day. This is blah, blah, blah. And I caught myself. No, I am no longer at work. I need to flick that switch off. I need to prioritize my wife and I need to know what her day was because that's my time now. And so being able to turn that switch off and reprioritize that becomes very important to me. So I apologize to her. It's like, no, listen, I apologize. It's just work was crazy, but it sounds like your day was a lot worse. What happened? And so being able to still be there, conscious, listen 100%, and just provide that support for her in the same way that she would do for me if I had a really bad day. And that's the thing, right? Not enough people are able to turn the switch off to focus on where they need to because they don't comprehend that just because the project is goal driven doesn't mean you can't make the time to block off and organize your priorities. And that's where a lot of people fail. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of people burn out. And unfortunately, I've seen it in my 10 years. Not only do they burn out at work, but they unfortunately burn out in their families too, as well. And that's where a lot of times you'll see a lot of separations and marriages start to happen, let alone divorces, or individuals just don't have connections with their kids. And it's very hard. Seeing it firsthand is very difficult because you hear the heartbreak in the individual I'm talking to, but also having the maturity in myself to understand that that is a result, unfortunately, of their own making by not making the time to prioritize the organization of it.
And that's also a learning, right? As you see that too, right?
It is.
Of like, that's not what I want to end up in.
It is. And it brings me to my next subject that I observed while working in the tech industry. Promotions, the more you move up in the industry, the more legit organized you really have to be. Because when you take on a promotion, what you're taking on not necessarily is not just a higher wage, but a higher liability. And a larger portion of it requires more of you to be present in certain things. But not enough managers are able to understand that to continue that blocked organization that they need. A lot of my leadership team members are either still single without kids and they're hanging on by a thread with their partners, and or they're constantly working around the clock to try to keep their job or their progress in their position, that they have no idea what's going on at the home. They expect the partner to be able to raise the kids themselves. And when I ask them about what's going on, they say, I don't know, so and so thinks this now, this and that. Whereas if you ask me, I can give you a full detail on what's going on with my entire family. And for them, like, yeah, I think there's so and so doing this. I don't know. They were asleep when I got home. I'm like, that's the disconnect is where everything honestly becomes everything falls apart. And the answer to the other question is yes, there are resources at the tech companies that can help you with counseling to try to get you to reorganize these thoughts, but not enough people want to take the time to take advantage of that either. Or some people are too proud to take advantage of that.
That's true.
When people think about talking to a counselor, they think that, they're going to admit that they failed, or they admit that maybe I'm just not as good as I thought I was. But in reality, it's just being able to talk to somebody to restructure your thoughts. Because again, when you get so caught up in yourself and your thoughts, you forget that there are options out there, but you're slowly sinking into panic mode. Your cortisol levels become so high. You're just in survival mode. When in reality, you shouldn't even be in survival mode. You just have to stop and discipline yourself to be able to say, this is my hard stop here. Boom. I spoke with my manager. We have an agreement. This is my hard stop here. And the world's not going to end if I tackle this project tomorrow, but I need to dedicate X many hours for this project as of tomorrow. And I'm on the same page with my leadership team members.
Just really setting those boundaries.
It really is, because I think not enough people want to communicate with their leadership. And so as a former manager myself, what I tell my team members all the time is I need you guys to tell me what's going on. My job as your leadership team member is very simple. My job is to look out for you. My job is to protect you and keep you moving forward and give you the resources and advantages that you need. But more importantly, my job is to protect you from your other team members if your other team members are either being toxic, they're not following through, or potentially harming the relationship we have as a team. Because again, not every team has a bad egg, but if that bad egg continues to be a rotten egg, you got to be able to eventually take a pair of gloves, pick it up and throw it in the garbage can and move on. Because you can have 6 amazing eggs in this basket, but that little rotting looking one's going to ruin the entire basket for everybody to want to interact with.
Yeah. So I was curious, kind of, you talked a lot about like priorities, work-life balance, things. So would you say that would be your biggest struggle as a parent in tech, or like what would you say is your biggest struggle?
I wouldn't say struggle, but challenge. And the reason why challenge is it becomes challenging because I myself am a victim of habit. In other words, I like to get a rhythm and I like to flow. Once I get the rhythm, I'm flowing. But you learn very quickly as a parent and as someone who is married and working in the tech world that 3 months in the tech world is a year's worth of progress for the rest of the world. So in other words, you cannot be complacent with your rhythm. I've learned to run with my rhythm until the rhythm starts to sound like I'm basically out of whack. And then I have to restructure myself every 2 or 3 months to say, okay, where have I basically become obsolete in, and where do I have to re-evolve myself to get back into this flow? And unfortunately, for some people who are complacent, changing your thoughts or your process every 3 months is a lot of work and they don't like it. Because if you're stuck in the old mentality of the work world like we grew up in, back in our days when we were children,
It was a long time ago.
if you had moved work every 3 years, you were unreliable. They wanted you to work long term to show that you're a consistent worker. In the tech world, if you're not moving or elevating yourself to a new position every 3 years, the real question comes up to is, What is wrong with you? Why are you not moving up? Why are you not hireable to somebody else? Should we be worried about you for our company? And that's where a lot of people become very disconnected to. Is that if you believe in the old world mentality that your parents or your family members explain to you, and you get introduced to the tech world, you're like, whoa, wait a minute. I just worked my butt off, but you're telling me it's still not good enough. Well, no, we need you moving. I was like, I don't want to move. I'm happy where I am. Like, no, that's not how it works here.
And I think also as you're in tech and as you're raising kids, it's like everything's evolving constantly. So it's like your mindset, your priorities, all of that has to keep shifting along with it.
Oh, yes, it does.
So like you said, 3 months, 3 years, a month, just things change real rapidly.
Oh, trust me. And on a side funny note in regards to changing and evolution, I survived my first emo phase with my eldest. Like the all black phase. Like it was black pants, black sweater, hoodie. And my wife was like, should we be worried? It's like, no, no, no. Let the little girl be a dark Hello Kitty. We're good. And it's funny because it all stemmed, I think, with the pandemic. And you forget that the pandemic freaked out a lot of people, especially kids who aren't aware, you know? And all I could do during the pandemic was just constantly reassure her. But, you know, I mean, she also is someone who likes to watch like scary movies and stuff. And so I think her brain got the best of her and she just started, she kind of engulfed herself in a darker image of like gloom. She kind of like went Wednesday Adams on me for a little bit. But the irony, and when I say evolution, why I tell people not to worry is we were at Disneyland like a year and a half later, and we're at the dress shop. And he goes, "Hey, Dad, this dress looks really pretty." And I'm looking at her, shocked, like bewildered. Like if you could see me, I'd probably turn like a couple of shades lighter because I looked at her, I was like, because I said, "You know, this is purple. I know it's a good color." I'm like, "Oh, so we're back to purple now? Okay." So like, and then,
You're like, I want you to know it's not black.
yeah, I want you to know, like, we need to get you checked for being colorblind because it's not black. Like, no, I like the purple and how bright it is. Like bright. I'm like, okay. And so, and that's the thing, right? And so I was like, cool. And I told my wife, I was like, you know, I love the saying that I learned a few years back. It's understanding that as bad as you think everything is going on at the moment, you have to understand and be able to accept that, quote unquote, eventually this too shall pass. And I live with that every time I give myself a semi panic attack because as much as I find myself to be very laid back, I'm a very overprotective parent. And I'm very aware, but I don't approach it as that. I don't hover as much as possible. But being in security and being the things I've done for security and corrections, I hover from afar. I'll give my kids like 100 yards, but I can still see my kid from 100 yards. I'm not going to be right above them, but I'll give them the sense of freedom, but that doesn't mean that Dad's not watching you from far away. Dad's that really weird, awkward, creepy sniper from far away. I see you. You do you. I just want to make sure you're good. And so that's me right there, you know? And it's great because, again, we have amazing tech for families now, like 360 app. We have Find My iPhone, which lets me find out where my kids are. Because, again, I gave my kids cell phones at a very early age because not only did I feel that they were responsible for it, but given my insecurities about the school systems and my ability to be able to be communicated in times of emergencies, I gave them that ability very quickly. However, I don't trust my kids. Very different. I don't trust my kids. I give my kids the benefit of the doubt. Two very different things that you have to explain to your kids. Trust is something that I, you know, whatever. But I said, I give you the benefit of the doubt because it comes with a catch. They understand that mom and dad will go through their phones at least once a week to make sure there's no inappropriate chats, inappropriate apps that are downloaded, movies they've watched, things of that nature. So I do still monitor and they understand and they have no problem surrendering anything to me. But it's that respect and understanding that I give you the benefit of the doubt. Do not change our stipulations. Because again, I don't use the word trust as much because trust means I set you free. I get it. But at the moment, until I can do that, I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt. Show me I can trust you. But at the moment, till then, I'm giving you the benefit.
That makes sense. So what about currently they're 12 and 10? What's your biggest struggle or challenge with this current age?
Getting up in the morning.
Wait, let me ask. Is it only on weekdays though? Because my kids wake up real early on weekends. They have no problem. But weekdays when they're school, they can't wake up.
It's usually the weekdays, yes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, my eldest is a night owl like myself. My youngest does have a crash time. She eventually will crash, but waking up in the morning becomes very difficult for them at times. And a lot of it too is learning how to balance all their after school activities on top of homework and being able to eat before they go to bed. And a lot of it too is it's just them being close to the preteen age where their hormones are there and their hormones want more sleep. But I'm like, listen, you can sleep on the weekend or you can take a nap right before we go to our next activity that we have. But for the most part, that's pretty much the biggest struggle I have, other than the fact that raising children and their fashion sense. I think you get what I say. And the reason why I say that is they want to try different things, but also I want to respect how they want to dress, but I want to make sure that they're consistently presentable. That's what I want to make sure. At my household, if my kids want to wear certain things, like as long as it's presentable, I'm like, cool. If it represents you and we have the understanding, if you feel like this best represents you, awesome. Just know that you have to make sure that you defend yourself and who you are. If someone tries to change or belittle you, defend yourself and be able to stand up for yourself. Like, this is how I feel. This is what makes me feel comfortable. And I've been very lucky and fortunate that most of my kids' friends are all on the same like level, and communications with their parents were all on the same page because of that. And a lot of what I feel like has been a good self motivating, self improvement factor for my kids is I put my kids in martial arts very young. And before they started, I told them, I said, listen, I want you guys to have this very important understanding. And you're not going to understand this now, but you will when you're older or a little bit older. I said, I want you to understand that I want you to learn this martial art so that you can learn to walk away. That's the one thing I teach them. The other thing I teach them is that number two, once you are versed in this martial arts, you are never to be the first person to throw the first punch. Then comes my however. However, if someone throws the first punch, you are given permission to finish what's been started. And I'm giving you the tools to do so.
Teaching them how to protect themselves, but also how to use the tool wisely.
Exactly. And what you've noticed is my kids are basically a year out from getting their black belts. And in the course of their training, I've seen what I wanted to see, which is the evolution of their train of thought and their thinking. In other words, they've surrounded themselves with a circle of colleagues and teachers that reinforce that, yes, you are able to defend yourself. Yes, you have the knowledge. It's been tested. Both my kids spar at tournaments, they do forms, they do weapons. But at the same time, do you want to waste your energy on somebody who's trying to insult your character instead of just walking away? Because if what they're telling you, you in your heart believe is not true, why are you entertaining it? And that's what I tell them. Don't entertain it, just walk away. And if they follow you and they put their hands on you, then you have the tools in your tool bag to defend yourself at that point. But until then, don't acknowledge what does need to be acknowledged. And it's a hard truth because as a preteen, it's all about their peers and it's all about what people think about them. But I'm trying to reinforce that mentality of, as much as you care about what other people think about you, I need you to be able to understand that if I'm not telling you this because I'm going to be the most honest person to you, if I'm not saying this to you, you probably shouldn't believe what other people are telling you, right?
Absolutely. And it's so important to teach that to them early on because they're going to encounter so many different things, especially in middle school and then high school. And a lot of kids start young in elementary. And, I
Oh,
hear things and I'm just like, gosh. So I've also sent my kids to Taekwondo with the same thing of like, look, walk away. But if they attack you, then you know how to protect yourself. And their teacher also teaches them that. The best way for you to just run away, walk away. But when this happens, this is how you defend yourself. And so, we just want them to have the confidence to be able to say, hey, I can protect myself when I need to.
exactly. And the other thing about self defense and martial arts that's really important is what I told my kids is the three scariest people you should be afraid of when they're angry should be myself, your mother, and your martial arts instructor. I said, we are angry with you, and your teacher is angry with you in a controlled environment. In other words, if we are the scariest people in the world to you, another kid yelling at you to try to intimidate you is not going to change your mentality whatsoever. It's like, if they're yelling at you, and if I'm scarier than you, so why should you be afraid of that person in the first place? Because I'm going to be angry with you because you did something after I've told you multiple times not to do it. I said, I will raise my voice to you because clearly my regular tone is not consistent enough for you to get the attention, to get the point across. But at that point, I'm doing this in the controlled environment so that it clicks in your head. There's nothing else that's going to happen after that. Your martial arts instructor will basically elevate his voice or project his voice at you to get you to increase the intensity in order for you to learn how much force it will take for you to block somebody from punching you so you don't get hurt, and or how much force you're going to need to endure to punch somebody to cause the type of pain to make somebody stop trying to hurt you. But if he's the scariest person in the world in that situation, there should be no other person in the world that should scare you. That should be enough for you to walk away. That's what I'm trying to get across is, if we're the scariest people in the world to you, everyone else's opinion shouldn't affect you enough that, their level of insecurity to call you out of your name, to try to yell at you, to break character, shouldn't break your perception of yourself enough to buy into what they're trying to do to you, to ruin your character itself.
And that's so important for them to know and have that foundation early on. So, the last thing, actually, before I ask the last question,
No, no.
I had a question just for you because you're protecting a lot of folks within tech companies and stuff. let me just ask you, like, as the people on the other side being protected, what is something that they can do or they should keep in mind to protect themselves?
That is a great question. Thank you for bringing that up. So, if anything else, if you're someone who is looking to just kind of find a way to feel more secure about yourself, right? Learning how to be more situationally aware is very important. In other words, you can be walking around the mall, you can be going to Great America, you can be going to Disneyland, but being situationally aware is being able to be present with your family, but also have that wandering eye to pay attention to other people. Not just necessarily being nosy. You're not focusing on the people having a gossip conversation and you're listening on to them. It's paying attention to like the tones, the demeanor of individuals. If you do so, you can usually tell very quickly if something is about to go sour very quickly. Like if a family is about to have a major meltdown in a theme park and have a scream fest, and you don't want to expose your kids to it, you can see it coming like, hey, kids, let's go over here real quick. Let's go on this side of the world over here. And or the exact same way. If you're learning situational awareness, you can tell when somebody has a certain posture when things are about to get very physical. You can take your kids like, hey, let's get you out of here. And so there's a lot of different classes you can take just to be able to learn situational awareness. And more importantly, there are small seminars you can attend. So if you're not into martial arts, which I 100% understand, you can look up certain seminars that people have about situational awareness. And it's usually like a 4 or 5 hour seminar because they'll give you multiple scenarios because a lot of individuals walk around with their head on their phones as opposed to their head on a swivel. And the one thing that people forget is your family should be your most important asset when you're walking anywhere else. Whether you're in a, again, theme park, the mall, a parking lot of all places. My gosh. Unfortunately, even in front of your house, vandals, thieves, whatever you want to call them, are getting as bold as to rob you as soon as you park your car in front of your garage. I have had a personal incident with a family member where my family member parked their car inside their garage and the vandals both came up to them on both sides of the car at gunpoint to rob them inside their own house.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm not saying this to scare people. What I'm trying to tell individuals is be situationally aware. In other words, when you're driving, and again, these are just things to protect your family and you're working in tech and things like when you're driving, if you see a car that looks like the same car has been following you for quite some time, change your routine on your drive. Turn it a different way. If they're following you, you'll know they're following you. So then driving backwards away from your house. And if they're still following you, then drive straight into like a police station or call 911 and let them know where you are and let them know that there seems to be a car following you. Same exact thing. If you are taking public transportation to and from work, those are major hotspots for a lot of people because what they look for are people who are not paying attention. And so, bottom line is, however, individuals who are looking to target individuals are looking for people who are not paying attention. If you're paying attention, the likelihood of you being targeted honestly will be a lot less versus someone who is. In other words, don't make yourself look like an easy target. Not to mention a smart thing to do for yourself and just to be aware. Take a small course in being able to defend yourself from attackers or muggers. They're very, very easy classes to take just to teach you how to do it. Because remember, 90% of most individuals are attacked by foreign objects. Not necessarily punched, but there's always going to be a foreign object in play, and it's usually swung or stabbed at you. And they have seminars for you to be aware of how to address yourself in that fashion too as well. And it's, again, those are things that you can apply for. If you work in tech, a lot of times in October, tech companies dedicate October for like security awareness, not just for hacking, coding awareness, but also physical protection awareness too as well. And so when I was still working at Meta, I led up a lot of different seminars for that. Before our layoffs, we were in the process of bringing up actually a weapons expert to try to do a seminar with like 20 or so at a time of our employees to show individuals how to basically get out of like someone who grabs you from behind to try to rob you or abduct you, or basically how to spot and see situations where someone seems to be observing or targeting you. Those are just things you just have to keep in mind. And more importantly, if you're traveling with your kids and you're in tech, you don't really know because you want to make sure that your kids are protected and you secure them at all times. Don't let them wander too far ahead. My wife and kids are always about 5 feet in front of me. I joke about this all the time because she goes, why do you do that? Because I can see everybody who's staring at you while we're walking. They're like, really? It's like, yeah. So I've always done that. It's always been a security person to me. It's something I do for my work too as well, to be not as conspicuous. But at the same time too, on a side comedic thing, I come from a biracial family. My wife and I are from two different cultures. My kids look more like me than my wife. My wife is blonde and my kids are not. So when we go to like certain places and my wife is walking with my kids, people sometimes tend to stare at her and the kids, and then when they see me behind, you get the, oh, that's why. I'm like, yeah. But again, I think the answer really is if anybody gets anything from this podcast, look up the definition of situational awareness. I think that'll start your journey into finding resources and training classes if you really are feeling like you are having panic attacks every time you are out and about because you feel insecure about driving to work, taking the transportation to work, or even let's say at work, so you feel like somebody is trying to verbally, psychologically, or physically harm you even at work, because it does still happen. And I want to make this very clear. And or if you are somebody who is in a relationship that is extremely toxic and you're trying to keep somebody from visiting you at work, this is something that you really want to make sure you bring up to your leadership team. As hard or as embarrassing as it is to you, I think for your personal safety, it becomes of the utmost importance that you bring it up, because it could potentially, honestly, save your life. And more importantly, if you work in tech and you feel like you're not feeling safe, any tech companies that have security teams over there are always more than welcome to escort you to your car at any given point. Don't be afraid to utilize those situations, especially if you feel like you're not feeling safe whatsoever.
That's true. Those are really, really helpful tips. Thank you. I'll be looking up that class. So, really, the last question I like to ask is just what's something you would tell someone who's planning to have kids, or something you wish you knew before you became a parent?
Wow. I should have thought about this more. No. You know what? What I like to tell individuals is this. If you're still single and you're looking to find a relationship while working in the tech world, the one thing I want to stress to you first is do and travel everywhere you want to go prior to getting into a relationship. Because the evolution to that is once you are in a relationship, you're going to be able to want to just focus on traveling with that person everywhere you guys want to go before you have kids. That way, once you do have kids, the majority of your focus will be, hey, this could be a really great place to take the kids. And a lot of that I say because tech moves really quickly, but also the tech companies also offer a lot of different benefits programs within the company, and you can utilize those to travel places or just do getaways or things of that nature. So, and tech companies also have a lot of collaborations amongst different clubs that they have. Take advantage of it. Be social. Be social, because if you find your circle of confidants in that tech world, I think, especially with people who have the same family situation close to yours, I think you're going to find that the longevity of your job there is going to be much more secure, because you'll have a support system that you can establish sooner. Not to mention, in the basics of all basics, these are all references too that you can have for other career opportunities moving on too that you can get referrals for. But more importantly, it's just make sure that you balance your work life with your relationship with yourself. Make sure you balance your work life with your relationship with your partner. And more importantly, once you do have kids, and this is my own personal opinion, your priorities honestly should really shift to balancing everything on making sure your children have the most accessibility to opportunities you can provide for them. And a lot of those opportunities can be supported by tech companies. You just have to be able to ask the right questions. Before I left Facebook Meta, my two daughters knew the ins and outs of that company and gave tours to family members better than I can. They knew all the shortcuts, nuances. They knew all of the food workers. Food workers would come up to me, not to say hi, but to ask me if my kids were coming today because they saved them treats and snacks. And I'm like, what about me? I'm here too. And this is a big, big company. So if anything else, those are the kind of impacts you can have in a company, which is great, right? So the tech company provides an amazing opportunity for you to grow. What I suggest is you need to be able to make the time to get out of your personal box and put yourself out there, because that's the only way I really feel that you'll be able to find the resources necessary to not just provide support for you, but to be able to provide amazing support and resources for your family working in tech. And it's not just coming from somebody in security, it's just somebody who's worked in tech for so long that the perks that they're paying you for, maximize it. They're there for a reason.
Right. Well, thank you for sharing those tips and also sharing your experience. I've learned so much today. There's so much that I want to go do now. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks so much.
Thanks. And it was great catching up. And for folks who don't know, I haven't seen Mike. We were just saying, I haven't seen him since we ran into each other in Great America when our kids were little.
Yeah.
And before that, it was high school. So it's been a while.
Yes.
So I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about all of this with me and with all the listeners, sharing all those tips as well. So thank you.
Thanks for taking me down memory lane.
Of course. And I hope you have a great weekend ahead. Take care.
We will. We have a very busy one lined up, and I'm thankful we are.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I love that. Sometimes I'm like, maybe we should be doing a little bit more. Slowly ease into that.
Can I just add one last suggestion? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I got to get this out. So if you're someone in tech and you're super busy and you're starting a family or you're trying to figure out things to do with your family, buy season passes to theme parks. Statistically speaking, you will end up spending more money trying to figure out what to do than actually just having a place to already go.
Gosh, that is so true. Especially like with Great America, right? You buy the season pass, it pays for parking. You go for Halloween, you go for
Yeah.
Christmas, go to the water park in the summer.
It pretty much covers 6 months worth of entertainment for you at any given weekend or weekday.
Right. And then they're tired when they get home.
Exactly. And like I said, and I tell people all the time, is it's not necessarily just theme parks too as well. If you want to keep it educational, the aquariums have a season pass you can go to,
Right. Museums.
the zoos. It's a type of wisdom a friend of mine who had kids very early gave to me. I've stuck to it for so long because it's worked out. It's worked out very well for us.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I always tell people too. I'm just like, they're like, my kids are too young. I'm like, no, there's little kid
Yeah.
sections too. Because
Yes.
I think when we were younger, you hear Great America, it's like teenagers go there, right? And I didn't know young kids, so I didn't even think there was a little kid section. Like I've never even thought about it. And then I realized like, oh my gosh, there's so much to do for kids of all ages. So it's really
Correct.
awesome.
Theme parks at Great America are a great testing, proving ground to see where your kids are at developmentally too as well, in terms of rides and entertainment and how long they can last. So places like those are great to create milestones for your family, not to mention controlled areas for photo opportunities so that we can have memories and you can look back to be like, hey, remember when we used to do this kind of stuff?
Yeah, no, that's so true because when we first went, my younger two could barely walk, and then the second one's walking. And then the third one, it was just bringing a stroller all the time. And then he starts running around, and
Oh,
you see
definitely.
that. That's a great point.
We're at that point right now where we tell them, come meet up with us in like an hour, go ride and come back to us. Like, it's like, I mean, that's like a big milestone.
They must love that.
Oh, they enjoy the temporary freedom. They just don't know I'm 100, 200 yards away watching them in line. So
Right.
they see it, they're enjoying their freedom, but it's a controlled environment and it's great.
Do you find this also? I think I find when, sometimes we'll even go to the mall and be like, you guys go on your own for a little bit, like New Park Mall, you know how
Oh,
it's
yeah.
very deserted, right? So we'll be like, go on your own. And then we'll find that they actually don't know what to do. They're like, and then they end up coming to look for us, but they don't really want to walk with us, So they're kind of far off, but then trying to figure out what they want to do. It's really funny.
You know, it's great. Doing that is actually really fun because also you get to learn to establish what your kids' usual stomping grounds are. And that'll come a long ways for you to help establish a rapport with your kids because then you can figure out where they like to go and you can have conversations about those and ask them questions.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. Thanks for bringing that up.
Of course. But thanks again for having me. This was amazing.
Yeah, it was really a lot of fun. Thanks again for agreeing to be on the podcast. Take care.
You as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Parenthood Bites. We hope you found our episode informative and entertaining. If you're a parent in the tech world or know someone who is, we'd love to hear from you. Please reach out to us at chow@parenthoodbites.co, and we'll be thrilled to add your experiences to our interviews. That's chow, CHIAO, at parenthoodbites.co. And to our potential sponsors out there, if you're a business or know of one that would like to support and partner with our podcast, please don't hesitate to get in touch. You can also reach us at chow@parenthoodbites.co. Thank you once again for tuning in, and we wish you a fantastic rest of your week. Until next time, take care and stay curious.